So welcome and thank you for joining us for tonight's virtual presentation, Personal Insults, Street Brawls, and Uncounted Ballots, Electoral Politics in Federalist, New York, with Rob Haberman. Tonight's presentation is one of the programs that is associated with the exhibition that's currently on display at the Albany Institute, Fellow Citizens DeWitt Clinton's Broadsides of the Early Republic, and I'm sure a few of those broadsides are going to make an appearance in tonight's presentation. My name is Patrick Stenshorn. I am the Director of Interpretive Programs at the Albany Institute. Joining me today on the call is Victoria Waldron, who is our Education Assistant at the museum. She is on the call under the name Albany Institute of History and Art Education. If you should have any technical issues during tonight's presentation, audio's not working, video's not working, please send a message to her and she will be able to help troubleshoot any issues that might pop up. For tonight's presentation, we will ask that you please make sure that your microphone is on mute. If you are using a device with a webcam, that's completely optional. If you want to have it turned on, that's great. If you're more comfortable with it off, please feel free to do so. At the end of today's presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session with Dr. Haberman. We will utilize the chat function for the question and answer session. So what we will do is we will ask that you please type your question into the chat box. I will then read the name and the question to Dr. Haberman. Rob Haberman, who's our featured speaker tonight, received his PhD in American history from the University of Connecticut in 2009. His dissertation looked at magazines and national identity in the post-revolutionary era, and it received generous support from such institutions as the McNeil Center of Early American Studies, the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester, Massachusetts, the Library Company of Philadelphia, the New York Historical Society, and the New York Public Library. For the past 6 years, Rob has served as associate editor of the John Jay Papers Project based at Columbia University. The Jay Papers is a 7-volume selected edition that appears in both print and digital formats. And I apologize if you hear my toddler in the background. The project's 6th volume was recently published by the University of Virginia Press and covers Jay's treaty negotiations with Britain in 1794 and his subsequent first term as governor of New York State. Prior to working at the Jay Papers, Rob held visiting appointments at Colby College and Trinity College in Hartford and taught early American history courses locally at Fordham University and at CUNY campuses. Rob also volunteers as an associate editor for the Gotham blog, a blog established by the Gotham Center for New York City History. In addition, he serves as treasurer and on the executive council for the Association of Documentary Editing. This is an organization that supports editorial projects documenting the lives and legacies of literary and historical figures, including the likes of Emily Dickinson, Frederick Douglass, as well as John Jay. Rob's writing on media, politics, and authorship has appeared in such journal publications as American Periodicals and Early American Studies. His current research explores how popular memory of the American Revolution in New York State influenced elections and political activities during the early Republic. A recent article on this topic entitled Burning Memories, the Destruction of Kingston and the Gubernatorial Election of 1798 appeared in the recent issue of New York History. His talk this evening expands on that information presented in that essay. So please join me in welcoming Rob Haberman.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for the kind words and for organizing this presentation as well as this series of talks. Thank you also to Victoria for handling the tech aspect. And thank you to the Albany Institute of History and Art as well. First, for sponsoring this series of lectures, providing me with an opportunity to speak on these topics in a forum to share my research, and also for being just an amazing archival institution. I had the good fortune to visit the Albany Institute about a year and a half ago, and I viewed several of the broadsides and items that are part of the DeWitt Clinton collection, and they are just phenomenal. They Viewing them provided me with new understandings and new information that my colleagues and I working at the J papers had not had or had not known about Jay and his gubernatorial campaigns. So this broadside, the DeWitt Clinton broadside collection really is an amazing, if underutilized, resource. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. Is that coming up with everyone? Do you see, does it say personal insults, street brawls?
Yes.
Good? Excellent. Okay. So let me just put it on slideshow, view as slideshow. Okay. So my talk tonight is going in it very much. I see a lot of familiar faces or names from last week, and my talk very much builds upon the topics and information that Professor Joseph Edelman provided for his Albany Institute presentation on print and partisanship in early Republic New York. So I'm going to forego a little bit of the introductory material regarding the formation of the first party system and the role of print, newspapers, pamphlets, and broadsides in political elections during the 1790s, because Joe did a wonderful job addressing these issues. I mean, I will, of course, discuss them, but as I mentioned, I'm going to skip a little bit of the introductory material. So let me say that giving this particular talk tonight on November 19th is a very auspicious date and special occasion. The reason being is the famous treaty, that is the Treaty of Amity, Commerce and Navigation, that Jay signed back in 1794 with his British counterpart, Lord Grenville. This was the famous Jay Treaty. This was signed on November 19th. So I think it's quite fortuitous, and maybe it's even fate that I would give this particular talk about John Jay on November 19th, 2020. So before I actually give my talk, I just wanted to discuss a bit more the DeWitt Clinton broadside collection. So as Patrick mentioned, there is a phenomenal exhibit going on right now at the Albany Institute, fellow citizens, DeWitt Clinton's broadsides of the early Republic. And I strongly encourage everyone, if you have the opportunity, to please go and view this exhibit and see the exciting items. As you can just see from these images, there's an array of primary documents, miniatures, portraits, we have newspapers, we have correspondence. It really is an exciting exhibit, an opportunity to learn about how politics were conducted in the early stages of New York State. And of course, I understand we're in the midst of a pandemic and such, but you should, you can be safe, be smart about this, uh, wear a mask, social distance, and, again, when you have the opportunity, definitely go and check this exhibit. Go and take a look. There really is exciting material. Okay, so let's get started. And so my talk tonight is going to discuss Jay's gubernatorial elections. He was involved in three of them in 1792, 1795, 1798. He lost the first one. He won the subsequent election and then was reelected for the third. And then Jay said, I'm retiring from public life. And he moves to his country estate in Bedford. So my talk this evening will focus on Jay's campaigning and the elections that take place in New York State when he's running for governor. Before I do this, however, let's go over briefly John Jay's career. Now, John Jay, it's very interesting because his entire life is really, adult life is really up through retirement, it is defined by public service. Jay holds an array of official posts. He served as a diplomat, he serves as a politician, he serves as a statesman, he serves as a magistrate. And Jay is also active in the different levels of government. So he's holding these positions both at the municipal level, at the state level, and the national level. And moreover, Jay is engaging in all different branches of government. So he has posts in the executive branch, in the legislature, and in the judicial branch. So Jay is just one of these figures, as I mentioned, whose life, whose adult life really is defined by politics and public service. Now, having said this, Jay is primarily known for three primary activities. First, he negotiates two key treaties with the British government. The first of these is in 1783, when he's part of the American team that includes Franklin and John Adams, where he's negotiating in Paris with the British to end the Revolutionary War. So this is the Treaty of Paris that is signed in 1783. However, there are still unresolved issues between Britain and the United States in the ensuing decade, and there are also new issues regarding trade, impressment of American sailors, as well as boundary issues and debt issues that spring up. So in 1794, President George Washington appoints John Jay to head to London and negotiate a second treaty with Britain, which he does, and which I mentioned is actually signed on November 19th of that year. And even though this Jay Treaty of 1794, it's somewhat infamous right now, people, I think the common understanding of the Jay Treaty is that it was highly unpopular and that Jay receives a lot of criticism and is burnt in effigy, and people are cursing his name for negotiating this treaty. It's important to remember that the United States and Britain really were on the brink of war in the mid-1790s. And Jay's actions, this treaty really kept the US out of what could have been a disastrous conflict with Britain. So these two negotiations, these are one aspect what Jay is famous for. The second area is Jay is an ardent supporter of the US Constitution that is proposed and adopted in 1787-88. And Jay, along with Hamilton and Madison, contributes to this series of influential essays, the Federalist essays, in which there are numerous arguments presented by these authors that are intended to persuade New Yorkers to support the US Constitution and have the state convention ratify this new governmental framework. And let me also add, in addition to these 5 Federalist essays, Jay also authors a very influential pamphlet addressed to the people of the state of New York. And this pamphlet, although it receives none of the fanfare, it receives none of the attention that the Federalist essays do, this pamphlet, I think, was just as important, if not more significant, in helping New York ratify the Constitution. But this address to the people of New York is largely forgotten. And the third area of Jay's public service is his roughly 6-year stint as Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court. And here we have the picture on the left, this portrait is Jay in his judicial robes while he is serving on the Supreme Court. So for today's talk, however, I want to focus on John Jay's role as governor of New York, and specifically his electoral campaigns. So I want to start out with this question: why would John Jay leave his post as Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court to serve as governor of New York? I mean, we think, nowadays we think the Chief Justice, wow, this is, one of the most powerful, one of the most prominent positions an individual can hold. Why would John Jay willingly leave this post to seek election as governor? Well, to put it plainly, John Jay loves New York. John Jay is a New Yorker at heart. Even though he's a strong nationalist, he believes in the Union. He's a supporter of the Constitution and the United States. He also is very much concerned about politics, society, and the economy of his home state, New York. And he wants to make sure that New York is governed by an efficient and capable administrator. And you get this sense in this quote. This is a letter that John Jay, he writes to his friend Egbert Benson. This is while John Jay is in Spain advocating the patriot cause on behalf of the United States before the before the Spanish court. Jay writes to his friend while he's in Spain. You can get a sense of how homesick he is. The state of New York is never out of my mind nor heart. And in addition, there's another reason why Jay wants to leave his position as Chief Justice. And that is because serving on the Supreme Court, it's just too exhausting. All right. So for Jay and his associate justices, okay, it's not just a matter of presiding over cases in Philadelphia. They also have to ride circuit. And there are 3 circuits in the United States. There is the Eastern Circuit, which we see on the map. There's the Middle Circuit, which comprises the Mid-Atlantic states, and the Southern Circuit. And there is no task more burdensome or more arduous for the justices than circuit riding. They have to be traveling on the road, normally on horseback for months at a time. They have to stay at these really crummy inns. They're eating bad food on the road. They miss their families. And also, they have to ride circuit twice a year. So in some cases, Jay is riding in the middle of summer, and he's complaining about the extreme heat and the impact it has on him. Likewise, in the winter months, Jay at sometimes he's riding in the middle of blizzards. So this particular map that we see here, this is the Eastern Circuit for the spring term 1792. And here you get a sense of John Jay, the extent of his travels. He has to crisscross the northern states. He starts out in New York City. He goes to the Connecticut Circuit Court, meeting in New Haven. Then he has to schlep up to Boston for the Massachusetts court. Then head north to Portsmouth, New Hampshire for that court session, and then head all the way back down to Newport, Rhode Island, and then right across Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont to Bennington for his final court session. This took a toll on John Jay's health. He develops rheumatoid arthritis, and he suffers from what he calls piles, which today we know as the medical condition hemorrhoids. So this riding circuit is really taking a physical toll on his body. And Jay is begging Washington and begging the executive branch. He's saying, look, you have to do something about this circuit riding. It is just asking too much of us Supreme Court judges. And between 1790 and 1792, Jay actually has to ride this Eastern Circuit a total of 5 times. And during this particular circuit, the spring term 1792, Jay actually rode, he covers a distance of 913 miles, and he's on the road for 87 days. So that's about 3 months. So you can certainly get a sense of why Jay is not thrilled serving as Chief Justice and would look forward to being at home, being with his family, serving as governor. Okay, so as I mentioned, Jay runs for governor 3 times during the 1790s. And on this chart, you can see the election returns for New York State. So in 1792, as we see, Jay is unsuccessful. He loses to George Clinton. But then in the 2 subsequent elections, Jay emerges victorious and is awarded the post of New York's chief executive. And on the left side of this chart, I am showing you the election returns. We have the election returns for Kingston, New York. And the reason I do this is I want to give you a sense of the idea of every vote counting. We look at the electorate for Kingston, or at least the people who are coming out to vote, which is pretty much everyone. This is only a few hundred ballots that are being cast. So, speaking about the recent presidential election and the amazing turnout and this idea that every vote counted, this is certainly true when looking at the gubernatorial elections of the 1790s. And let me mention that during this decade, politics are very heated, very divisive. There is a high level of partisanship, not just in New York State, but also throughout the entire nation. And you have, by the mid-1790s, you have the formation of the first party system. So you have the rise of the Federalist Party, of which John Jay is a member, and you have the rise of the Democratic Republicans. Now, Jay chooses to align with the Federalist Party because their views in terms of what they see as the future for the United States are very much aligned with his. They're in favor of a strong banking system, a strong commercial sector. The Federalists want to see a strong executive at the national branch. And I think most importantly, in terms of foreign policy, the Federalists are in favor of maintaining close ties with Britain, while their opponents, the Democratic Republicans, see France as a national ally for the United States. So Jay and the Federalists, who include individuals like Rufus King and Alexander Hamilton, they want to see closer economic and political relationship with Britain, while the Democratic Republicans, who are led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, they want a closer alliance with France. And let me say, in terms of the election itself, Jay running for governor, that he really doesn't run for governor per se. He stands. He stands for election, meaning during all three of these elections, Jay is not an active presence. He sits back and lets his political colleagues, let his friends like Hamilton and Robert Troup manage his campaign. And the reason that he does this, that as a gentleman, Jay wants to preserve his honor and reputation, and he would find it too self-serving, too self-promoting if he was to take an active role in his own campaign. So let's now turn to the first election, which, as you see, I have called the disputed election of 1792. And this is one of the most controversial gubernatorial elections in New York history. And for this particular contest, you have John Jay running against the long-serving governor, George Clinton. So why is this election disputed? Well, at first count, okay, Jay, even though, as you see from this chart, Jay does not become governor, the election goes to Clinton. At the initial count of the ballots, Jay has more votes. Jay should have won this election based on the first count. But what happens is the ballots from three frontier counties, Tioga, Clinton, and Otsego, they are invalidated. The state canvassers who collect the ballots, they point out technicalities that, and in this way are able to say the votes cast in these three counties, okay, they are null and void. And because of this, Clinton is able to amass more votes and he wins the election. Now, the given reasons why these votes from these frontier counties are not counted is they claim that it's the sheriff who is the official who is supposed to deliver these ballots, that it is someone other than the officially appointed sheriff in Tioga and Clinton counties who has delivered the votes. And in Otsego County, the state canvassers point out that the official box that was supposed to be used to deliver the ballots, that this particular package was not used, and that the votes were delivered using a different parcel. So these really are, technicalities. And it's no surprise that the state canvassers themselves are Clintonians, that they supported George Clinton in his run. So on June 12th, this is when they officially declare George Clinton as governor of New York State. And it's only by 132 votes that Clinton wins the governorship. And as you can see, Jay won by a margin of 40 votes in Kingston. So what is Jay's response? He knows he has been robbed of this election, and most people feel this way as well. However, Jay wants to see a peaceful transition. He doesn't want to kick up a fuss because he feels that this could disrupt the social and political peace in New York State. And he doesn't want to create, what could turn into like a mini civil war in New York. So Jay largely keeps quiet, even though, again, personally and privately, he's fuming. But publicly, he keeps his mouth shut about this. Although he does say that there should be a review, either a judicial or a legislative review of this decision. And indeed, several months later, the New York State Legislature does hold a review. But at that time, the Assembly and Senate, most of these individuals are Clinton supporters, so they affirm the decision by the state canvassers. So Jay's followers, they're pretty upset about his defeat, and many of them are unwilling to accept, So many of them are unwilling to accept this decision. And what you have while Jay is, this is while he's still riding circuit, in July 1792, what should be a victory lap for him when he leaves Bennington, Vermont, and he's traveling down the Hudson River back to his home in New York City. Many people in the towns, like you see Lansingburg, Troy, Albany, Kinderhook, Hudson, and others along the way, the people come out and they cheer Jay. There are a lot of parades, there are dinners and lunches, and basically the people who come out are declaring him as the rightful victor and the true choice of the people for the seat of governor. And sometimes these public demonstrations that are going on, they turn into violent encounters. This occurred, there is such an episode in mid-June 1792, and this occurs in the town of Kingston. So once you have the state canvassers have declared Clinton as the victor, what happens is a group of Clinton supporters in Kingston, they all get together and they go to a local tavern. They have a few drinks for the purpose of celebrating their candidate's victory. This becomes a problem because right across the street is another tavern. And in this other tavern, you have the local Federalists in Kingston get together. They have a few drinks, and they do so for the purpose of commiserating Jay's loss. So what happens is these two groups, the Kingston Federalists and Democratic Republicans, they just don't stay within the taverns drinking. They come out on the street. And pretty soon, harsh words are exchanged, and then fisticuffs break out. And this particular document that you see on the screen This is a letter by John Addison, who is an eyewitness to this brawl. And he's writing to a friend, and he points out a generous and promiscuous club battle ensued, both severe and bloody. Judges and justices, law and gospel were neither heard nor attended to. So this shows you the ugly side of elections and campaigning in 1790s New York. And unfortunately, the street fight in Kingston, this is not an isolated episode during the 1790s. You have a lot of physical assaults, you have a lot of these public brawls, and you even have some duels that break out over these elections, over these political differences. Now, let's move on to the next election, 1795. And for this contest, John Jay is pitted against Robert Yates. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a portrait of Yates, but we do have his signature. Yates was a prominent state politician. He was he voted against ratifying the Constitution in New York State. He also served as the Chief Justice for the New York Supreme Court. And in this election, John Jay wins handily, as you see, and he also wins in the town of Kingston. And I think one reason is many New Yorkers knew that John Jay got a raw deal in the previous election. So I think that many people were sympathetic to his previous plight, and they considered him a very capable and worthwhile administrator, and they elect him as governor in 1795. Now, I want to show you this broadside, which is taken from the DeWitt Clinton broadside collection. This gives you an idea of how campaigning operated, how it functioned in Kingston. This was published in Kingston and in Kingston's Ulster County. So this is a circular put out by the Federalist Party. And what they do is, you can see, they provide viewers with the approved slate. So you have John Jay for governor, you have Stephen Van Rensselaer as lieutenant governor. You also have the Federalist candidates listed. The names where it says Samuel Barker and then Ebenezer Foote. These are the candidates for the New York State Senate and the New York State Assembly. And this list, you see a list, it's 127 names. This is actually a committee of correspondence that the Federalists have organized for Kingston and Ulster County. And the purpose of this committee is to collect and disseminate political information about the upcoming election. So this is the election in 1795. And I want to draw your attention to this particular name, Peter von Gaspik. Okay, he's the chairman of the Federalist Party. The reason I want to draw your attention to his name is that just 2 weeks ago, I was in Columbia's Rare Book and Manuscript Library. I was going over the John Jay collection. I was looking at documents. In fact, I was looking for receipts for newspapers that John Jay had subscribed to. And just by accident, I came across this receipt that John Jay made out to Peter von Gaspik. And the reason I point this out is this gives you an idea that politics of this time, that these individuals are very much socially connected and have personal relationships. So what is this receipt all about? Well, as you can see, it's dated 6 July 1785, and it reads, received of John Jay an account on account of his board at my father's when he attended the convention at Kingston in 1777, $40, for which sum he is to have credit in that account. Signed, Peter Van Gaspik. So back in 1777, while the Revolutionary War is going on, New York's government, the seat of government in 1777, is meeting in Kingston. And John Jay is one of these officials who is in Kingston because he at this time is serving as Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. So while he's residing in Kingston, he is boarding at the home of Abraham von Gaspik, who is Peter's father. And several years later, in 1785, John Jay gets around to paying Peter von Gaspik the $40 that he owed for lodging at Peter von Gaspik's father, at Peter von Gaspik's father's house in Kingston. So I thought that was neat, and it shows you that there are these long-standing connections among these political figures. In this case, it goes from 1777 all the way up to and indeed past 1795. So let's now move forward to the election of 1798. And here we have John Jay running against Robert R. Livingston, who is known as the Chancellor, because he holds this position of Chancellor in the New York State court system. And Livingston himself is quite a prominent, well-known figure in state politics. He's part of this committee that helps Thomas Jefferson draft the Declaration of Independence. Later on, he serves as U.S. Secretary of Foreign Affairs. He negotiates the Louisiana Purchase with France. And just real quickly, I want to add that after Livingston has negotiated the terms and drawn up the treaty with French officials, at this time, John Jay's eldest son, Peter Augustus Jay, is in Europe. And Livingston actually asked Peter Augustus Jay, because Livingston has to stay in France, he asks Peter Augustus Jay, he goes, will you take this treaty back to the United States and deliver it to the government, make sure it gets safely into the right hands? And Peter Augustus Jay serves this role. And it's kind of sad, this particular election in 1798, because John Jay and Robert R. Livingston are former best friends. They attended King's College together. They started a law practice together. John Jay married Sarah Livingston Jay, who is Robert R. Livingston's cousin. So they are best buds, and yet they have this falling out starting in the 1780s. And they are political opponents in this election in 1798. So here we have the election returns. And as you see, Jay is reelected as governor. However, he loses in the town of Kingston. Robert R. Livingston is elected governor. So for my remaining time, I want to look at, why does Jay lose the town of Kingston in the 1798 election? As you see, he won it in 1792, 1795, in 1795. What are the special circumstances why Livingston overtakes him by a good margin in 1798? Well, to answer this question, I think you have to go back to when Jay is stationed in Kingston in 1777. So here you see at the top of the map, you see the town of Kingston, And Kingston, again, in 1777, we have the Revolutionary War going on. And Kingston at this time is serving as the seat of government because British troops have occupied New York City. So what happens in the fall of 1777 is a British military expedition starts coming up the Hudson Valley. Jay is afraid, not for himself, he's located in Kingston, but his family is located in Fishkill. And you see that at the bottom of the map. And Jay is afraid that the British troops who are coming up the Hudson Valleys are going to attack Fishkill and harm his family. So what Jay does is in October 1777, he borrows a horse and rides from Kingston to Fishkill. He collects his young family and he heads to Kent, Connecticut, where he stays with a local minister for a few days. But what happens is the British Army who are coming up from New York City, they completely bypass Fishkill. You know where they do attack? Kingston. Kingston, which is the seat of government, it is basically burnt to the ground. Over 300 buildings are destroyed, crops are ruined, livestock is killed. The town is completely flattened. And it's important to remember, though, that even though John Jay has fled Kingston, he's not the only one. Most other town officials, and in fact, most other town residents also flee before the British arrive. Now, Robert R. Livingston also plays a minor role in this episode. He doesn't live in Kingston, but his family estate, Claremont, is nearby. And a few days after the British destroy Kingston, they march to Claremont and burn down Livingston's estate. So Livingston, obviously, he's gutted. He's worried about, oh no, how am I going to support my family and the local community? My estate has been burnt down. But nonetheless, what Robert R. Livingston does is he holds large tracts of land throughout New York State. And he is concerned about the plight of Kingston, which has just been burnt down to the ground as well. He donates 5,000 acres of land in the Hudson Highlands to the people of Kingston to help support their relief efforts. So think about this, the destruction of Kingston and its aftermath. John Jay leaves, collects his family in Fishkill, and flees to Kent, Connecticut. Robert R. Livingston, his home is destroyed, but he donates 5,000 acres of land to the people of Kingston. And I think that this comes into play in 1798, okay? And this election. So in 1798, what's happening is the US is on the brink of war with France. Remember that John Jay had signed that treaty with Britain in 1794 to avoid an Anglo-American war? Well, the American ally France is really upset about this treaty, and the French revolutionary government, they consider this as a betrayal of US towards France. So France and the United States in the summer of 1798, they engage in what is known as the Quasi-War. And this is largely a maritime conflict between the United States Navy and French privateers and the US Navy and the French Navy. And what we see here, this broadside that came out probably in the summer of 1798, this is a broadside put out by Livingston and his followers. And what they are saying, what their message is that, do you want another disastrous war to befall New York State? This would devastate our economy. This would put your family and children at risk. Look at what happened during the American Revolution. Several towns, including Kingston, and here it's referred to as Esopus, but they point to Kingston as being destroyed. And they're saying, do you want this to happen again? And the idea is that John Jay is anti-France. He favors a closer relationship with Britain. And the claim is that he is willing to go to war against France. He sees that as part of American interests. And the Democratic Republicans are saying, look, Jay is going to lead us into this disastrous conflict. Okay, so they're accusing Jay here of being a warmonger. There's another piece of propaganda that the Democratic Republicans do. They also accuse Jay of a lot of things. They accuse Jay of selling out to British interests. They say, look, he doesn't care about the United States. He's just a servant of London and Parliament. He wants, his true loyalty is to the British crown and to the British nobility. Okay, so they accuse him of this. They accuse Jay and Jay is also like Livingston. Jay has land holdings throughout New York State. Livingston and his colleagues actually point out that Jay is a cruel landlord and that when his tenants can't pay their rent, that he takes them to court and sues them and tries to squeeze every last penny out of people who are renting land from him. So they say all these nasty things about John Jay, including they accuse him of being a coward. And here again, we go back to this episode of 1777 when Kingston was destroyed. So here's a piece that appeared in the Albany Register on April 20th, 1798. And it says, when the enemy in 1777 broke in upon our country and burnt Esopus, meaning Kingston, Mr. Jay was in its neighborhood. Was he among those who showed any disposition to defend his country and repel the invasion? He was not. His retreat was early, rapid, and distant. I mention the circumstance only as it illustrates the character of the Captain General of our militia and assures us of the discretion with which he will exercise the duties of that part of his office. Under his management, your towns may be burnt, your country desolated, etc., etc. So this reference to Captain General of the militia, Jay as governor is also commander in chief of the state militia. And they're pointing out, hey, this guy is unfit to serve as as the state's military commander. Now, the following day, the New York Journal, which is out of New York City, it writes this piece, miserably will those be disappointed who expect any other aid from him. He took care never to see the enemy during the late war. It is said he fled to Kent as soon as matters became serious, although he bore an important commission in the militia. Now, these accusations, they're propaganda, they're, half-truths at best. They're really not fair. They're not telling the whole story. Yes, Jay fled Kingston, but so did many of his other state officials, many other political colleagues. Also, it's true that Jay was appointed a colonel in the New York State militia. He commanded the 2nd Regiment of Infantry in the city and county of New York. However, this was really an appointment in name only. Jay never trains with this regiment. He never sees active service with them. He never sees combat with them. Instead of continuing with this commission, He serves as Chief Justice. He serves in a political role. Nonetheless, he still is addressed as Colonel, even though he doesn't really see active service. So this propaganda is really unfair to make these claims against Jay. Finally, and I know we're running out of time, so I want to finish up here just by pointing out, so we can understand maybe why the residents of Kingston wouldn't have supported Jay in 1798. Why would they have supported Livingston? Well, here's a newspaper piece from a local paper in which a group of Kingston residents are asking Robert R. Livingston to run for governor. This is back in 1795. And their reasons are, they think, as they say, we think him sufficiently qualified in every aspect for the office. And secondly, because we know his humane and benevolent soul, susceptible of feeling for his fellow creatures. Witness the gratuity of 5,000 acres of land to the suffering inhabitants of this town after its barbarous destruction by the British in the year 1777. The memory of which charitable and Christian deed is not yet so gratefully eradicated. So this was back in 1795. Kingston residents are asking Robert R. Livingston to run for governor. He doesn't. Robert Yates runs for governor, but Livingston does run for governor 3 years later, and there's little doubt that the people of Kingston remember the support and generosity of Robert R. Livingston in 1798. And I think that help explains why, even though John Jay wins the governorship in New York State in 1798, he loses pretty badly in Kingston in that year. All right, so if any of you have been interested in this talk and want to learn more about John Jay and about politics in 1790s New York, I want to share a few resources with you. First, we have the John Jay Papers image database. This is a database containing original documents, original copies of John Jay's letters and papers. There are some 13,000 documents that are part of this database. It's free, open access, and term searchable. So if you have a topic that you are interested in, say John Jay and slavery, or the role of Sarah Livingston Jay, this is a great resource to visit. There's also volumes 1 through 5 of the John Jay Papers of the bound volumes. These are available on the National Archives Founders Online. This is also a free database. I think what's different with this is here you would be able to read transcribed copies of these documents, as well as annotation, extensive annotation for them as well. And finally, if you're really adventurous, the volumes of the selected papers of John Jay are available for purchase by the University of Virginia Press. And here we see this particular volume just came out about a month and a half ago. This is volume 6, which covers the Jay Treaty and the first term of Jay's governorship. So thank you for your patience. I'm sorry I ran a bit over. If you'd like to get in touch with me or get in touch with the John Jay Papers, here is some contact information for you. Thanks again. I look forward to your questions and comments. And thank you to Patrick and the Albany Institute.
Thank you, Rob. You already have a few questions, but I'll give you a second to take a drink there. So we have a question from Adam, who asked, how might history have been different if John Jay accepted Washington's offer to be the first Secretary of State instead of being Chief Justice?
Oh, wow, that's a good point. That's a good question. And it's also not as well known that Washington initially, he offered Jay, he thought he and Jay had a relationship that went back to the Revolutionary War. Jay was serving as president of the Continental Congress in 1779, and he was active in gathering political support for Washington's Continental Army in the field. So Jay and Washington have a very close relationship that's forged in wartime. So when Washington is president, he actually gives Jay his pick of any cabinet position. Now, Jay, as we know, is trained as a lawyer, and he had also served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So he wants to continue on in a legal post. So he tells Washington, I think Chief Justice would be an ideal position for me. Now, what if Jay had instead accepted an appointment as Secretary of State? That's a tough one. I think that Jay possibly still would have negotiated the treaty with Britain in 1794, because he was so well trusted by Washington, and because he had that key diplomatic experience of working with British dignitaries, that he still would have gone to London. Yeah, beyond that, it's difficult for me to say, because I'll say this much though. It is possible that Jay would not have run for governor of New York State, because he would have been more settled in Philadelphia. He would have had his family with him. He would not have been riding circuit and all the troubles that went along with that task. So it's possible he might have remained within the administration.
M. Tauba asked, maybe it's worth noting that New York statewide elections were held at the end of April, not November, correct?
Yes. Yes, that is true. They were held in the spring months. Did I mention that? If I mentioned that they were held in November, my apologies.
No, I don't think you did. I think it was just a matter of clarification, because
Okay.
when I think with the maps, he was returning in midsummer, and that's when kind of the results were, or like the parades and stuff were coming back. So
Right.
the difference between the election was spring to the celebrations in the summer, not November.
Right. Well,
To
the votes are coming in April, May,
Yeah.
and yet then you have these state canvassers say, wait a second, we've got these problems. And in mid-June is when they actually say Clinton and not Jay is the victor.
Julie asked, did any of Jay's campaigns have any slogans?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I haven't come across any really snappy election slogans like Jay and Liberty. Um, I will say this much. One aspect of Jay's election in 1798 that you see come out is that they point out that his supporters point out that Jay will keep us safe. As governor, Jay is committing a lot of his time, energy, and state resources to defending New York City. He's building up the fortifications on Governor's Island and throughout the harbor of New York City. The reason is, and we've virtually forgotten this today, but back in 1798, there is a very real fear that a French warship is going to enter New York Harbor and basically destroy the city. And who knows, maybe French troops will even invade. As preposterous as we, might see that now, that was seen as a very real possibility in 1798. So Jay's supporters are pointing out that John Jay will keep you safe. He's committed to protecting New York City and by extension, New York State. Also, one thing I think, it's not really a slogan, but Jay, my colleague wrote about this. My fellow editor, Brant Vogel at the Jay Papers, wrote about how Jay takes a very active stance in the mid 1790s on behalf of public health. Because what's happening in New York City and in some other parts of the state during the 1790s, you have yellow fever is breaking out. So what Jay is doing, he's forming commissions in which he wants them to provide proper sanitation, proper health resources, hospitals, doctors to help the population recover from this devastating yellow fever outbreak. And yellow fever is pretty much breaking out in New York from 1795 through 1801 and sporadically after that. So John Jay is taking active measures. He's quarantining. He's implementing quarantine measures for ships that are coming in. And he's implementing other public health measures to combat yellow fever. So this, I think, also adds to his popularity.
Amelia asked, in more recent elections, are there other cities that can be used like you used Kingston to analyze the factors at play in the election?
Oh, I have definitely. I have no doubt there are several other communities. It would be really interesting to look at them to see how these elections played out. And one of the resources that I use, if you'd like to see the local election returns, there's a great free database called A New Nation Votes, in which it provides the elections not only for governor, but for state assembly, for state senate, not only for New York, but for all of the states and for a variety of other positions, for tax surveyors, for sheriffs, as well as, key positions like senator or governor. And I have no doubt that you would see these very local circumstances and local affairs come into play and help decide these elections at the town level. Off the top of my head, I don't know of any other communities where you could, view them and their election returns for the gubernatorial elections of the 1790s. However, in New York City, that definitely comes into play. Local affairs, local circumstances definitely have an impact on Jay's election and re-election.
Mark commented and asked, thank you for showing the parallels of today's volatile elections to the elections of the 1790s. Given the tyranny of minority rule and an overbearing federal government over the last 4 years, especially against New York State, shouldn't we also consider anti-federalism in a new light?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me say that I like to remain firmly rooted in the late 18th and 19th century. I'm not a political scientist. I'm a historian by training and trade. So I think that you are right to point out that there are similarities with the gubernatorial elections of New York in the 1790s and say the presidential election this past year, looking at the volatility and the extreme partisanship. Um, it's I will, and I'll look at this maybe from John Jay's perspective. You know, one thing is John Jay is an ardent nationalist. Uh, he, along with Hamilton, Washington, you know, he is in favor of having a strong national government, including a strong executive, and that both a strong national executive and a strong state executive. And I meant to point this out earlier on. This is just a good opportunity to mention this. So we looked at John Jay documents with that are located in the DeWitt Clinton broadside collection. It's interesting that John Jay and DeWitt Clinton are actually political adversaries. So while John Jay is governor, DeWitt Clinton is serving in the state legislature, and Clinton actually very much is proving a major obstacle to John Jay and Jay's ability to govern effectively in his last months. So this is a dispute they are having over the Council of Appointment. So John Jay is supposed to nominate candidates for county and town sheriffs, tax surveyors, or excuse me, tax collectors, town surveyors, etc. And DeWitt Clinton is serving as a member on this Council of Appointment, and he is one of the members who is voting on John Jay's nominees. And DeWitt Clinton and his fellow Democratic Republicans are completely shooting down every judge, every sheriff, every tax collector that John Jay is nominating. And this really hinders Jay's ability to govern, and it effectively shuts down his administration in his final 5 or 6 months. So when Jay leaves in 1801, he leaves Albany and retires to his estate in Bedford. He's like, good riddance, I've had enough.
Well, that looks like the last question that has come through so far. There are many comments, many thank yous. Thank you so much. This was an amazing seminar. Thank you so much for this, Rob. You know this isn't my era, but really interesting. Thank you. This was very interesting. So I'll give it just another couple seconds for any last minute questions. But I will definitely echo all of the thank yous for your presentation today. Thank you so much for all of your expertise in answering all of these questions. And it looks like that's probably the last question that is coming through. So I think I'll take this opportunity to say thank you again, Rob. Thank you, everybody who was able to join us tonight. Again, we hope you are able to come to the museum at some point and see the exhibition and some of the broadsides that were featured in the lecture tonight. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.
And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you for the questions and comments. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.